I'm Andrew Howley, the chief editor of AskNature. I'll be hosting us here and kind of giving John some questions and throwing to you guys as we get your questions. There's a Q&A functionality at the bottom of the screen where you can submit your questions. We have Colin and Gretchen from our team who will be monitoring those and reaching out to you. We ask that everybody throughout John's talk stay muted and even into the Q&A stay muted until we call on you. You know, we'll say, oh, Mary has a question. Let's go to Mary now. And then Mary can unmute and ask her question. That's how we'll start the live conversation kind of part of this. Colin and Gretchen will be talking to you throughout as you've submitted questions and they get teed up for participation. Happy to say John Warner is certainly somebody who needs very little introduction. And within this context and this community, I think he needs no introduction at all. So I think I'll probably just say a couple things that I've found particularly exciting about him and things that I'm excited about with the conversation. And got a nice turnout here. We hope everybody's been enjoying the Ask Nature Hive. If you've been in already, starting some conversations there, following up from our conversation with Janine Benyus last month. We're really excited to have John Warner here with us today and to continue this conversation. At the end, we'll share a QR code for 30% off membership to the Ask Nature Hive so that you can join that going forward. That'll come out in an email as well. If you need to jump off early, don't worry about that. And we'll also archive this on a YouTube link that we'll share afterwards as well. It's not simulcast right now, but it'll be available as an archived version of this, so you can always come back to it and hear more if for some reason you need to leave. But thank you, everybody, for being here. And thank you, John, especially. John Warner, obviously, here is a pioneer in green chemistry, literally wrote the book, co-wrote the book, helped design the 12 principles of green chemistry, set in motion this great movement to make chemists aware of the effects of the things that they make and how to do it in harmony with the rest of nature, which is such a critical part of biomimicry. When people that I talk to who are new to biomimicry ask about it, I always use green chemistry as like one end of the spectrum. I was like, it's literally everything from chemistry to ecosystems and how we interact with them. And so it really gets us down into the micro and the macro, as you know. And John has been there from the beginning. And what I really love is before that, his chemistry background, pre-green chemistry, was with Polaroid, which is beautifully used chemistry to bring to life images and art. So I love that. It's a very beautiful use of chemistry and kind of gives a thematic vision to the kind of colorful, beautiful, joyful, engaged way that chemistry can be a part of our lives through this work that you're doing. So, John, thank you so much for joining us. If everybody's ready, we'll let John kind of say a few words if he wants to kick off, and then get right into it. When John's done, we'll open up the Q&A.
Well, thank you, Andrew. It's a pleasure to be here. I've, been a proud part of the biomimicry community since the very beginning. Been blessed to know Janine Benyus from a long time ago, and we interact with each other a lot over the years and have interacted with a lot of the Biomimicry 3.8 and the Biomimicry organization. So happy to be here. I did put together a few slides. I wanted to give a little bit of a discussion about the opportunity, the crisis, and why I feel green chemistry and biomimicry are so critical right now. So if you indulge me for about 25 minutes and then be happy to take some questions. And so I will share my screen if all goes well. Can someone confirm that I'm doing this correctly? Do you see the title slide well? Yes.
Yep, looks good, John.
Great. Thank you. All right. So essentially, my wife, Amy Cannon, and I have been at this for a very long time, way in the early 2000s. We have a shared vision. We envision a world where the chemical building blocks used every day are healthy and safe for humans and the environment. She runs the nonprofit educational organization Beyond Benign, and then I run this organization called Technology Greenhouse, where I'm trying to invent and show the reality that we can invent reinvent technologies. You know, here are the labs. I have a material science lab in Woburn, a polymer and small molecule site in Lowell, moving into another site November 1st, and then collaborate with an organization called Robotics for AI and machine learning. But when we look at the 17 UN SDGs, I feel they're a perfect statement of the needs for our society in many ways. But when you break them down into health, environment, and social, you see that there's a lot of focus on social and not as much on health and environment. Now, of course, they're all interrelated and everything, but a lot of times people say, well, many of the UN SDGs don't have to do with materials or things like that. I would argue that every single one of the UN SDGs needs something to help our society move forward, whether it's creating jobs, whether it's pulling people out of poverty, whether it's adjusting, social equity. Everything is going to have something to do with a material. And if we don't get that right, we're just going to continue to propagate the problem. But there are so many different approaches, and they're all wonderful. There's responsible care, safe and sustainable by design, resilience, systems thinking, limits to growth, UN SDGs, circular economy, ecology of commerce, cradle to cradle, planetary boundaries, biomimicry, green chemistry. Makes me sad is we're in such a polarized society these days that everyone has to be, well, this is the better approach, and this is the incorrect approach, and this is yesterday's approach, and this is the future. Man, this need to have this competitive stuff is kind of why we have the problems that we have today. I feel that every one of these approaches are wonderful and worthy. And if someone wakes up in the morning and says, I really love this approach, I want to dedicate my time and passion to it, instead of explaining, well, no, this is the better approach, we need to embrace one another and just find out how we can work together so that we're all passionate, moving in the right direction. And so the way that I've tried to think about this myself, and I want to give you a disclaimer. I don't claim to have any gifted insight. I don't claim to have any answers to the world's problems. I've been at this for 40 years. I've come to look at the world in a certain way, and I'm going to share that with you. But if I come off some presumptuous egotist saying, well, you need to listen to me, no, 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 please. This works for me. And if any piece of this helps you, that's great. And if it doesn't, that's okay. I'm happy to have conversations, but not claiming that this is the right answer. This is just the way things work for me. I look at natural resources and I feel that we extract molecules and ingredients, and then we synthesize materials and components, then we manufacture products. And if we do a very good job, those products stay in use and reuse for a very long time. But inevitably, some of those products have to be mechanically recycled back to the materials and components through what I call the assemble and disassemble system. And then the materials and components sometimes need to be molecularly reprocessed back to molecules and ingredients through what I call the materials metabolism. And then the molecules and ingredients sometimes need to degrade back to natural resources through the regeneration cycle. Finally, we want to maintain stable ecosystems. Now, this is a whole hour and a half. I could talk about this. I'm just summarizing it here. But essentially, this isn't a circle. It's a pendulum. And the outside clockwise direction is the human-built world, and the inside counterclockwise direction is returning back to nature. And it's these five circles that work with each other. But what works for me on this is that the intersection on the bottom allows us to have almost an algorithmical assessment of sustainability. But the thing is that when someone like me makes one of these maps, the most important ingredient is humility, because none of us are smart enough to get this right. Inevitably, there are things we're going to miss. And what usually we miss when we do things like this is the stuff that escapes from this. When we manufacture, when we recycle, inevitably there's leakage that gets into the environment. It creates a porosity between the human built and the natural world, and we lose a little sustainability. When we synthesize and molecularly reprocess things, we have stuff that creates an additional porosity between the human built and the natural world, and we lose more sustainability. When we extract and degrade, there's additional leakage that creates more porosity and a loss of it. So what we need to do is we need to realize that this stuff is happening. But when all these corporations, when people put together their maps that are showing how everything is together, they never really put on, oh, every once in a while we're going to have an oil spill, or there's going to be plastics accumulating in the environment, or train wrecks emitting, toxic fumes or CO2 in the atmosphere. And this is what nature desperately needs us to be focusing on, is the stuff that we often don't put on those diagrams. And so one thing we can do is we can look at nature, look at the inside mechanism and say, how would nature turn these leakages, which nature does every day for 3.8 billion years, into feedstocks? The best way to make a waste go away is to redefine it as a feedstock. And that is the fundamental of nature that humans have not figured out yet. And so it all comes down to the molecularity of chemical transformations, right? Here's the thing. If I go to a building and I say, oh, they're recycling products there, and I go to another building and I say, oh, they're manufacturing products, that can never be sustainable. And it's completely alien to nature. Think about nature. Think about this morning or this afternoon when you had lunch. I don't know where in the world you are, but your last meal. You sat there and you ate this food. It's really, really good. What does nature do? It breaks proteins into amino acids. It breaks carbohydrates into sugars. It breaks, lipids into fatty acids. But that's not all. At exactly the same time, we grow hair, we grow skin, we grow blood cells. Nature has combined the disassembly and the assembly at the molecular level in the same place, in the same time. All right. That we humans have not touched. All right. And that once we have the humility to learn from nature and figure this out, we can start really becoming sustainable. So we not only need to invent technologies that help people behave differently, which is important, but we also have to invent technologies that are intrinsically in harmony with nature. All right. So in our human need to be polarized as team recycle, everything should be circular, everything should be recycled. And then this team, no, everything should be bio-based, everything should be biodegradable. Really, even that has to be a fight. Can't we have both? Can't we have natural biodegradable materials that are reused as much as possible? And we create local jobs, we help support economies, and we do so everything has the people in the middle of it. And when we just think of isolating factories, we're forgetting that we are part of nature. And in the same way, we need to be part of thinking about when we invent and design products. It's not just how it impacts the environment, but how it impacts the people that are going to be interacting with it, not just using it, but who's going to be manufacturing and what opportunities can we do from that perspective if we're truly going to address the 17 UN SDGs. So all of this has to be reinvented. All right. And we've been at chemistry for what, 200 years? Nature's R&D cycle's been 3.8 billion years. Again, the key is humility, humility, humility. We have so much to learn. And so when we talk sustainability, usually a lot of people, most people, in fact, are talking about why. And this is really important. We hear about climate change and we hear about toxins and we hear about biodiversity loss, or we hear about what people talk about. We should do the UN SDGs. We should do, circular economy or something like that. And these are important. But what else is important is how. Because why and what describe the problem and present the problem. But if we don't figure out how to solve it, that's when that's how do we get out of this mess? And that's why biomimicry and green chemistry is such an awesome combination, because while the urgency of the problem is absolutely important, and the metrics of how we're going to measure this are absolutely important, we still need the skill set to go do it. And here's the problem. I want to play the violin. I can go to conferences that say how happy I would be if I could play the violin. But if I don't learn to play the violin, if I don't practice, if I don't have a mentor that can teach me, I'm not going to be able to play the violin. And it's the same thing with solving these problems. This isn't enough just to say, we want this, and this is how we're going to measure it. We need to ask nature how to do it. We need that teacher. And so, of the infinite number of molecules and products out there in the UN SDGs, we need to tie them together. Okay. And that's where biomimicry and green chemistry such come to help us. There are many other things that we need in addition to this, but at that fundamental basic materials level, this is where we need to be. Okay. And so green chemistry perspective, this book, Green Chemistry, has been out for a long time now. About 1998, it came out. There is a whole chapter, what is green chemistry? There's the definition of green chemistry. But, there's the 12 principles of green chemistry. This isn't everything. There's only a lot of other things, but it is that fundamental molecular level mechanistic approach to how do we go about looking at these problems. Because the way I look at it, if tomorrow morning everyone on the planet just got it, everyone wanted sustainability, every individual, every retailer, every manufacturer, we're in trouble. Because from my perspective, only about 10% have solutions that are sustainable. 90% of everything we do has problems. Some of them are big problems, some of them are little. There's some low-hanging fruit that we're starting to do. But right now in 2024, we still have about 80% of the problems where there's no idea how we're going to do it. And so we really need to figure out how are we going to invent things to be more natural, to be more life supportive. And that doesn't happen just by wanting it. There are skills we need to learn to do that. So from my perspective, the biggest barrier to sustainability actually is the invention. And so, how do we do this? All right, there are infinite molecules, infinite materials out there, and there are infinite products that we want to solve problems for society. But it's kind of like the land of Mordor, trying to cross this chasm between molecules and products. All right. And so what I've kind of realized, and again, remember my statement, this is no gifted insight here. This is the way I look at it that I'm sharing with you. That what I have found is although there are infinite molecules and there are infinite products, there's actually a finite number of mechanisms and properties. That's actually probably, I've never really gone down in concept. I bet you about 65, 70, 80, under 100 fundamental mechanisms. All right. And so and there's like this, what I call a mechanistic equilibria of scale. Okay. So a product is defined by materials properties, color, flexibility, hardness. All right. That's not a molecule. All right. But it is defined by what's called materials mechanisms. It's oversimplification called engineering, but it kind of works. Polymer crystallinity, Hansen parameters, Joule-Thomson coefficient, still not a molecule. The next stage is what we call molecular mechanisms. This is bond rotation, van der Waals, surface area, stuff like that. Now we can look at a molecule, say what are the mechanisms of the molecule, what are the materials mechanisms those molecular mechanisms makes, what are the materials properties that the materials mechanisms make, and what products can we make? Or on the opposite direction, here is a product, an unmet need. What are the materials properties needs? What are the materials mechanisms? What are the molecular mechanisms? And we can go back and forth in this dynamic equilibrium. All right. And here's the key. If when we define the materials properties, we think of the 17 UN SDGs, and we say, how can we make this product in the life principles of biomimicry when we just add that to a definition of what we want these products to be? And it's no different than anything we've been doing for the last 50, 60 years of material science. The problem is we're not putting that in there, okay? And we need to. All right. And so now we are in the 21st century. The Nobel Prize came out about AI and stuff like that. Yes, we need human intuition and computation. I don't actually like the concept of artificial intelligence for a variety of reasons. I don't think AI works absent human intuition. I use the concept of enhanced intuition. All right. But using intuition, computation, whatever you want, we can now imagine a future where we can start going back and forth here. So I could say, how could I make an Apple product? All right. Or I could ask, how does nature make an apple? And now, if I use this context of what are the properties of that apple? What are the materials, mechanisms making that apple an apple? What are the molecular mechanisms? What are those molecules? All of a sudden I can redefine what it means. And this is the pathway to using nature as our mentor to help us learn how to do this. Okay. And so on the right-hand side, we have what does the technology do? And on the left-hand side is what the technology is. And both of these things are important. Sometimes people get mixed up by that. Oh, we need water purification. Well, if we're using carcinogens to make membranes to purify water, what the technology is a problem. If we're doing solar energy, but we're using nasty toxic materials, that's a problem. So we need to do both, worrying about what the technology does and what the technology is, because if the is isn't sustainable, it won't matter what the does. All right. And that's why we need to step out of the human built world and learn from nature, because nature has figured this out. All right. But we have these organisms in nature and we make products, and people say, okay, good, let's make, boards and things like that. But here's the thing. If I take and I extract molecules from nature, and then I make a synthetic molecule, like I put in this acetyl group, and I combine them to make products that a little bit of synthesis and a little bit of nature, all of a sudden people get nervous. They go, wait a minute, that's a synthetic material. We need natural material. I think people need to really think about what they're saying when they say that. All right. Because imagine this. If I take eggs, flour, and water and I cook them and I make pasta out of them, there no longer is eggs, flour, and water in the pasta. The process of cooking does chemical reactions. Acetylations happens, esterifications happen, cross-linking happens, hydrolysis happens. Synthesis in and of itself is not a bad thing. Nature does synthetic chemistry constantly. Everything in nature is a product of the synthetic reaction. So what we need to do is we need to learn from nature how to better synthesize molecules and materials, but we can't get to a sustainable future without synthesizing things. We just got to synthesize things the way nature would. So there is what the product does and what the product is. All right. And we need to, because right now there's a lot of corporations that are struggling with this, a lot of government agencies. What is a synthetic material? What is a natural material? And I think we need to up the game here of what mechanistic chemistry is. Because nature does synthesis all the time. We need to learn from nature how to do it better. All right. And so throw out a couple quick examples, and I'll go really fast for this just to show that this can really work. Okay. Sclerotization, the process by which an insect molts and sheds. That's the product that nature gives. If we look at the molecules, we can actually make products that are now sustainable. One product, hair print, is a product on the market that's been out for a while. That's a hair coloring technology. It doesn't color the hair, it restores the human pigment. That is based on insect sclerotization. Another product is a company called Noir Materials that I spun out. It balances biodegradation with strength using the exact same mechanism of insect sclerotization to make really strong, really stretchy, really good materials, but they're completely biodegradable, non-toxic, and environmentally responsible. Can't do that other than from learning from nature. How would nature color something? How would nature make something hard? That chemistry mechanism is where it's coming from. Another example, how does wood have its beautiful structure? Well, you've got lignin and cellulose and hemicellulose, and they're all coming together through non-covalent interactions. Well, collaborative aggregates is, believe it or not, an asphalt paving technology that is inspired from this structure. You know that asphalt, when you shine light on it, over the years, it gets hard and brittle, so we have to repave it. So the product Delta S and Delta Mist are designed. They're bio-based. They're literally plant-based. You can eat these things, and they allow you to completely recover the asphalt pavement, and so you don't need any virgin inputs. And there's collaborative medicinal development. Actually, have an ALS drug in phase 3 clinical trials based on this concept of molecular collaborations that nature has taught us. Orientation. A mitochondria orients the molecules to allow electron transfer to go across the mitochondrial matrix. There's a company, Ambient Photonics, now that is in manufacturing in California, making devices, and they're selling devices that are using this photovoltaic technology. A project with NASA to make hydrazine detectors, toxic materials in the cockpit of a spaceship, using this kind of self-assembly system that nature taught us. Thymine dimerization, and thymine is DNA photodimers. Using this mechanism, we can essentially make photoresist. This is my daughter Amy from a long time ago. And this is making encapsulated materials, or doing actually hair, formaldehyde-free, environmentally responsible hair shaping, curling and straightening in pleats and textiles. I think the last example, photoisomerization, the biology of the eye. What happens in the eye is molecules, when you shine light, they bend. And then they come back, and they bend, and they come back. Inspired and learning from those molecules and those mechanisms of a company called Mist Miner that is harvesting water by having, when the light shines, it absorbs water. When the light turns off, it releases water, so that we can have capture and release using light going on and off in a diurnal cycle. Or we can essentially do little wireless LEDs and turn off the chemistry in wireless LEDs and flow reactors to do synthesis, photodegradation, and photoabsorption. So I just want to fly through and show you some of these things, but how? How do we do this? What if all these problems still need to be solved, how do we get better at inventing? And here's the thing. We talk about nature, and we talk about molecules, we talk about materials, we talk about processes. But my problem is that I would argue there is more than enough money to solve every problem on the planet. We're just allocating it really poorly. That maybe 5% of allocated investment actually succeeds and 95% fails. And while everyone's talking about how do we get more money, how do we get more ideas, I feel we also need to ask nature, how do we get better? The 5% success rate is going to kill us. We don't have time to solve these sustainability problems if we don't solve this. And the thing that I realized is there are no committees in nature. Just think about this for a second. Imagine there was a committee in nature and someone said, "Oh, I want to build a giraffe." The committee would have looked at it and said, "Oh, next too long, that'll never work. Nope, nope, next." But the giraffe happened. And why did the giraffe happen? Because there were no committees. We have become hypermetricized in our society that if anyone's going to get funding, they have to show how much precedence. Don't worry, this is going to work. This person did this person did this person did this. Certainly this is going to work. And that's not how nature does R&D. Nature takes chances. That's the whole concept of evolution. All right. And so the more precedence that a proposal has, the less innovative it is. Now, more comforting is to the person writing the check, but we're still failing 95% of the time. So what are we protecting? All right. And so the way I look at it is that research is bumpy. Okay. When you do research, you can't put it on a Gantt chart. You have to have these moments of eureka, all right? But development you can put on a Gantt chart because you figured all that stuff out, okay? And so there are three phases of research. You do the bumpiness, and once you figured it out, then there's the three phases to get to the pilot scale. We have struggled here because what happened is like 30, 40 years ago, academia did this and industry did this. But now in the last few decades, academia, because of our overmetricization, is now doing far less of this part, and industry is doing far less. And now there's this big gap. How do we fill this? Well, how would nature do it? It's all about entrepreneurship. I would argue that entrepreneurship is the natural industrial model. All right, that academia is not a very natural model. Industry is not a very natural model. Adaptive systems, our best hope is entrepreneurship. Doesn't mean everyone has to stop everything and become an entrepreneur, but if you're in academia, learn more about how to talk to and work with entrepreneurs. If you're in industry, learn how to work better with entrepreneurship because entrepreneurship is the most natural model of R&D. And in the same way that we need the molecules and we need the products and we need the processes, we need to reinvent how we invent. All right. And again, the best mentor out there is nature. Okay. And this is where we need to get out of all these silos. People talk about biology and chemistry, and I'm this, I'm that. I want to leave you with this thought. Chemistry is the fundamentals of biology. Biology is the fundamentals of neuroscience. Neuroscience is the fundamentals of philosophy. Philosophy is the fundamentals of mathematics. Mathematics are the fundamentals of physics, and physics are the fundamentals of chemistry. There are no silos. There are no buckets. Every single one of us is somewhere on this thing. And we keep focusing on, oh, I'm a chemist, I'm a biologist, I'm a physicist. Those boundaries don't exist in nature. Those are completely artificial, human-built things. And here's the thing. They don't exist. So when people say we have to tear down the boundaries, they're going about it the wrong way. We need to recognize that the boundaries aren't there and that we have constructed them. There's nothing to tear down. We've got to realize that those boundaries are not there. So we need to rethink how to do this. And again, this is where this beautiful relationship between biomimicry and green chemistry is so important. But what worries me is we're running out of time. We still need to do better. Who's going to invent these things? And so people turn information into knowledge. And with that knowledge, we turn materials into products. And those products are like the food we eat, the medicines, the human built world, the energy, and all of these things support the very people. We are in our own ecosystem. And the critical part there, I put that little asterisk beside the people because what that asterisk is inspiration, is collaboration, is the sense of community. That the only way we effectively do this is to reinforce our population to just work better together instead of being polarized on who does what and what's the title of the book that you wrote and all this. If we just realize that we would all be in this together. And that's why, in my opinion, my personal hero in all of this is Amy. Amy Cannon, my wife. I am clearly biased. I'll try not to break up and start crying here, but she is just selfishly and her organization Beyond Benigna really important. And if people here we need to collaborate more with Biomimicry. We already do a lot together, but there's so much more to do. And what she's doing and Beyond Benigna is doing is asking colleges and universities to bring these concepts into the required curriculum, not as an elective, not as an added course, but as a fundamental part. If someone is being given the tools to go out in the world and invent a material for society and not being taught what we're talking about here today, then we're wasting our time. because we got to get the inventors to embrace this. And so what Beyond Benign has done is, at last count, and I'm probably out of date now, there's over 180 signers of the green chemistry commitment. All right. And it's a community of people. And so it doesn't say you must do this. UC Berkeley does it one way. Stockholm University does it another. Monash in Australia does it another. When people sign this community, they share best practices openly. There's no fees, there's no expenses. A lot of things aren't even in PDF, they're in Word, so educators can make it their own. This is where we need to go, and we need to grow this community. So people listening to me now, I hope that you look forward to joining together, and these two organizations and everyone that cares about this starts working together. So please go to beyondbenign.org and talk to Amy, because this is the path to the future, that biomimicry and green chemistry together is one of the many ways, but in my opinion, because I'm a chemist, the best way for us to be going about this. So thank you very much for giving me a couple minutes to talk, and happy to have a discussion and questions. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, John. Everybody, if you want to do a round of applause with your audio or your icons, you can feel free to do that. We'll give a few minutes now to start thinking through your questions. Start posting them there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen as you mouse down there. And like I said, Gretchen and Colin will be talking to people and queuing you up and getting you ready. As we get questions ready, we'll be able to throw to you, and you'll be able to unmute and ask your questions to John directly. But I'll start us off here. Thank you, John, that ran such a wide spectrum of human experience and dimensions of nature, really wonderful and stimulating in a lot of dimensions. One thing that stood out to me that I would love to know, because you're one of the few people that can explain this kind of thing, is when you talk about adapting sclerization
Mhm.
into all of those different applications, how does that process happen? Like we know a lot of other biomimetic processes, but how do you go from that at the chemistry level?
Well, I think again, I was blessed that there's a professor at UMass Boston who is a biologist studying insect sclerotization. All right. And he had us over at his house for dinner one night. And we're eating in the kitchen, and his wife rolls her eyes and says, "Look at this." And she opens up the refrigerator. And there are containers of browned up dead bugs at different colors. There's black, there's brown, there's light brown. I'm thinking about the food I'm eating at the point, but anyways, and so that's not part of chemistry. That's not part of reading a journal. That's just being a human interacting with other humans. Here's this beautiful, wonderful person that's dedicating his life to understanding this process. And by saying, okay, something about that, then when someone said, well, how do we color here? It all kind of merges together. So I really don't feel it's step A, step B, step C. It's just kind of being aware of stuff and allowing those stuff to happen.
Yeah. Yes. All right. Well, we have our first questions here coming from Michelle. Would you like to go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, hi. Thank you. It was a great
Hi.
lecture. Yeah, agree with you when it comes to integrating sciences. My question is, can we integrate AI bioimaging like cryo-EM and X-ray crystallography to visualize it in computational models, what's actually going on in the chemistry in nature?
So yes, I firmly believe that there is a future for enhanced intuition. I think that we're not quite there yet. And what we need to be careful of is because, as I said, there's plenty of funding out, it's going to the wrong places. There's a few not successful approaches that are becoming well funded. And I'm worried that those when they when they end up not being successful, it's going to hurt this whole program. And so we just got to be steadfast and realize that some of these approaches aren't going to work. That doesn't mean the approach doesn't work. It means how they were funded. And it goes back to this research and development. I think that the model by which we're imposing resources to the AI community community is destined to fail if we don't step back and learn more from nature and figure out how to be more innovative. So yes, we need it. Yes, it's going to have to be there. I think it will be successful, but we've got a lot of failures between here and then that we're going to have to endure first. And so, but I can see I use it literally for crystallization of materials to create non-covalent envelopes around molecules. So I really do feel there's no problem. It can't enhance intuition. It's never going to replace human intuition. It'll enhance that intuition. But absent that human intuition, there's nothing to crystallize with what we call AI.
Yeah, we've been talking about that a lot with biomimicry too, where we often talk about there's the biological model and the innovation, and we talk about it as kind of these two things and forget that in between those is the human making the judgments, making the one asking the questions and interpreting the answers. And it's really important to think about that and to think of the role that we play as another natural organism as part of all of these systems. There was a question that I had also as you got through when you were talking about the synthetic and kind of the hybrid materials. You're saying, well, this is just like baking a cake, right? This happens in nature. It's all part of nature. What are the ways that we go about doing that where it'll be a good synthesis and not a bad synthesis?
So from my perspective, the 12 principles of green chemistry do suggest that a bio-based material is superior to a depleting feedstock. But here's the thing. If I extract a material from a plant, or I have a 17-step synthesis in a factory to make that same molecule, it is not necessarily better for the environment of society to do the extraction. A lot of our extraction techniques use nasty solvents, there's all kinds of unsustainable technologies, and oftentimes there's all kinds of social issues with where are those plants coming from, how are they being grown. And so from my perspective, extraction from nature can be sustainable, can be good. A multi-step synthesis could use really bad, problematic chemical reactions or could use very good. So there is nothing inherently better between the two. We humans could do it right, or we humans could do it wrong. And essentially, that's where we need to make sure that whichever process we do is going to have to be, what I say is in collaboration with nature. All right. And so the mistake people make is to think, oh, if I do something in a beaker and a flask, that must be bad. But if I yank it out of a plant, that must be good. And in my experience, that's not true.
Yeah. And we say that a lot with biomimicry too.
Yeah.
You can look from nature and do bad things, and there's technologies you can use that are good or bad, and you can deploy biomimicry well or ill. The idea is to use that judgment and to engage it and say, if I'm going to be doing this, what is the biomimetic way that I could be doing it to make it better? And that kind of gets to a question that we have from another one of the attendees here, Bruce. Welcome, Bruce. Or if we get ready, everything seems okay. We can give him another second.
I think Bruce is on mute, maybe.
Okay. We can help unmute Bruce. Give him a second. We're going to come back in case Bruce really wants to ask his question himself. I won't go ahead and read it for him, but we can get to another one. This is actually one from the staff that has come up. Are there examples of organizations and groups you've worked with that are doing a good job in truly being transdisciplinary?
Kinda. Yeah, and the thing is that we got to be careful. We can't make transdisciplinarity a bucket. All right. And so one thing I I'm a member of the Club of Rome, okay? Donella Meadows is another one of my personal heroes. She's a founder of the Club of Rome, and she wrote the first book, System Thinking in Systems. Systems thinking is important, but we're going to step back and think of this. The Western civilization, our academic institution, applies the reductionist approach. And so we separate things and we break things down and we break things down and we break things down. And that's great in academia, but it's a very unnatural thing to do. And so what I worry about, we say now, oh, wait a minute, we've done all this reductionist approach. We've created all these silos. So let's create a silo called systems thinking. No, and so it's important, but we got to realize the best thing to do is to stop breaking down and just recognize, think about any kind of natural thing. Think of a farmer. Does a farmer say, okay, I'm just going to look at the water on a pea, and then I'm going to look at anything that is interacting with nature is by definition a systems approach. The moment it's not a systems approach, it's unnatural. So let's not make systems unnatural. Let's keep that whole context and recognize the danger in siloizing systems.
Yeah. It seems like maybe one of the things that we can do here is to, like de-silo ourselves. And
Mhm.
as we have questions, just find, do a little research, learn
Yeah.
a bit about another discipline and just kind of internalize that so that you are naturally flowing from, from field to field, from silo to silo and kind of help
Yeah. Yeah.
flow
Yeah.
through it that way. You seem like somebody who synthesized a lot
Yeah.
from. Okay, so we have another question here from another attendee here. Molian, can you ask your question?
Hi, yeah. So
Yeah.
on my back, can everybody hear me? Sorry. So my background is in chemistry and biomimicry, and I worked to create the chemistry and biomimicry course with Mark Dwarfman at ASU. But sometimes it feels like we're just talking and saying all of these things about the integration of biomimicry in the chemistry field, and maybe nobody's listening. So do you have suggestions or advice for how to get in touch with the right people and how to get involved in making this kind of idea become reality?
hmm Okay, very important question. Thank you for asking that. And my response to that is, as you would expect, a little bit weird. Being a photographic scientist from Polaroid, I love to tell the story that one day I was cleaning out a drawer and I came up with a roll of film. And this roll of film is like from 10, 15 years ago. And I have no idea what is on that roll of film. I didn't even know how do you go get it developed? I haven't done it in so long. Do you go to CVS? Who develops the damn thing? All right. But what's really cool is what is on it? What are those pictures? So 15 years ago, light came into a camera and put a little latent image on that film. Years later, a picture's going to come up, and we don't even know. When you speak to a group of people, you may not feel any impact is happening, but it's like that roll of film that something is going into the people's minds, and it may be 10, 15 years from now. You'll never even know it happened, but something you said, something you did, put some kind of inspiration into that person, and they do remember and they do embrace, and you have literally changed the world by doing it. But looking for instant feedback isn't the way to go. And just have that confidence that you care, your passion is definitely affecting those people. And don't worry about that immediate reaction, that sense, okay, I really got these people. Because oftentimes magic happens years later, and sadly, you may never know. And that's the wonderful part of what it is that we do.
Yeah, that seems to be kind of another picture or lens on evolution. You kind of talked
Mhm.
metaphorically about evolution earlier, but it's like that first organism with a new adaptation does not
Has no
necessarily think,
idea.
oh man, I'm about to
Yeah.
change the whole face of my species.
And maybe, when I look at innovation and I look at it, that need to be part of the immediacy of success is fundamentally unnatural.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really just being authentically acting with
Yeah,
your adaptations to your local environment. That's
yeah,
just doing the best that you can, and it's kind of a
yeah,
collective thing that
yeah, yeah.
produces the bigger waves.
Mhm,
Um, this is great, John. Thank you so much.
mhm.
Um, we've got plenty more time here, everyone, so you can keep coming with your questions. We have a great one here from Megan V. Megan, go ahead.
Oh, sure. Now I have to remember and read my question.
You
Okay,
can
sure. So I'll
paraphrase.
just read it. Could you speak to the process of biofabrication, as in using the outputs of organisms themselves? So for instance, I'm thinking of a company that uses a methane happy bacteria
Mhm.
that's producing a polymer in its body and then harvesting the polymer from the organism. So I'm curious about your thoughts on that type of fabrication.
So I still haven't
Thank you.
fully developed all of my thoughts on that. Thank you for that question. I'm always concerned when the premise is to employ organisms to do what we want them to do. Now, one can say it's just a cell, John. Come on. And probably there is a certain layer of organization that is. And so I do feel that some form of synthetic biology is necessary for our future to be sustainable. There are just certain things that why not collaborate with nature and the enzymatic processes that have evolved over 3.8 billion years. We just, in the same way we have the 12 principles of green chemistry, I wish someone would take the time to put together a set of ethical principles for synthetic biology and just let's agree as a community what's cool and what's not cool. Because right now there's some cool stuff happening and there's some way not cool stuff happening. So right now I am not so presumptuous. I don't know the field well enough to know what but I do definitely believe that, we drink wine, we drink beer. God bless synthetic biology. Okay. There are certain things that synthetic biology does quite well. And I love that, I've heard this thing, there was this company, Zymergen, and what they said is, would you rather live next to a refinery or a winery? And so that's kind of a cool concept. So I think the opportunity is there, but there's also an opportunity to do this very poorly. And so we need some ethical approach to doing this. I don't see a sustainable future without it, but I also see disaster if we're not careful. Yeah.
Yeah, and Michelle has another kind of a follow-up to that one that might go nicely now.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
very similar. It's just, can we look at basically bioproteins as materials in the biomanufacturing process, but instead of using the actual species themselves or even a bacteria or a yeast, can we actually develop organoids, maybe with the culture of cells and maybe stem cells, but it's something maybe more biological but less bioutilization.
Yeah, there's so many approaches. No one has a crystal ball to figure out what would work in my perfect world. And this is just not that it's the right thing to do, but the way I'm hardwired. I want to learn from nature. How does nature synthesize proteins and then create a complex that isn't extracted from nature, but is inspired by nature to create the molecular machinery to template the process and simulate the biological process, but not and be able to make protein. So there's what the protein does and in how we make the protein. Nature is already teaching us what they do, and we still haven't quite figured out how to mimic nature in the synthesis of these complex molecules. We take the enzyme and the organisms and do that, and sometimes that might be the best way. But where we really need to do is there's two forms of biomimicry for me. There's biomimicry, the noun, and there's biomimicry, the verb. We've done a lot of biomimicry, the noun. Hey, look at this thing in nature. This is kind of like it. We haven't done enough yet of the biomimicry, the verb. How does nature manufacture this? How can we learn from that? Not exploit it, but learn from it.
Yeah, definitely. It was just like we could possibly even 3D print a ribosome or try to
Mhm.
like multiply or just try to see how the chemical is behind it and actually do what the microRNAs are doing
Yeah.
in the transitional process is very, very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ah, great. We're going to go back to Bruce, who I think we maybe have lost, but he had a good question. So we still want to revisit Bruce's question from earlier. He was wondering, what are your top three potential ways to use nature to address the climate crisis specifically?
Thank you, Bruce. I probably can already say I'm going to be a little heretical here, and I'm glad you said the word address. Okay. Again, when it comes to funding, there is a it's important. Climate is a serious issue. We need to reduce the carbon in our atmosphere. Yes, but I think there's a disproportionate effect on that because it's quantifiable, because we've developed all kinds of metrics. But right now, my concern is that microbial growth is increasing, pathogens with microbial growth is increasing, diseases and human suffering in poverty-stricken places is going to have real lot of problems. We need to figure out how to create materials that are inherently antimicrobial, not going and killing and creating resistance, but designing, learning from nature how to make things that are intrinsically microbial stats, not sides, but stats. Because as we're losing shoreline communities, and we're going to have to rebuild, if we rebuild communities with exactly the same building materials that went into the ocean as well, we're in trouble because the world is changing. And so the first thing I think biomimicry we have to learn from is, yes, it's important to try to slow climate change, but it's here. And we need, these people need our help, and to just say, well, no, we're just going to try. It's the climate has changed and we aren't fast enough adapting to those things there. So biomimicry, first of all, I do think we have to roll up our sleeves and try to get these absolutely urgent things done. Now, when it comes to CO2, everyone's talking about mimicking nature to do what a tree does. But a tree doesn't. Why do we need an artificial tree? Okay, the tree is taking CO2 and making oxygen. Oh, let's make a box that does what a tree does. I can understand why there's sometimes when that's absolutely critical. Not making fun of it, but we also got to realize that to simulate a tree, sometimes the tree is the right answer. All right. And so we need to learn from nature. But oh my God, I don't want to, and I've actually heard this. Then this makes my head explode. I've actually was at a seminar where someone said they wanted to improve the efficiency of a tree. Yeah. I love Lord of the Rings. When Gandalf comes into Hobbiton, the first scene, and he goes, Frodo, a wizard is never early or late, but arrives as precisely. That is so important for biomimicry because think of a tree and think of the leaf on the tree and think about the efficiency of the photosynthesis in the leaf. People say, oh, that's very inefficient. We could make more efficient photosynthetic things. But what if you did? Then all of a sudden, the size of the leaf would be smaller. The shade that that leaf provides for the ecosystem underneath this tree is all going to be messed up. And all the organisms and all the ecosystem that is based on the size of the leaf that is just providing the shade. So nature is never more efficient or less efficient. The word efficient doesn't apply to nature. Nature does exactly what nature needs to do for the entire system. So if you want to be reductionist and take that approach, oh, I could make this efficient, look out. That word efficient doesn't apply because that is there for a reason. And so we just need to be more thoughtful about this whole concept of efficiency. Oh, Andrew, you're on mute.
Thank you very much. We've hit the hour mark here. We can keep on going with a few more questions, but I want to give everyone the opportunity if they need to jump off just to see. Here's what's coming up next. Next month, we have our CEO, Amanda Sturgeon, and Erin Ravallo, who are going to be exploring biomimicry and biophilia in the built environment. That's going to be our first of our monthly live conversations that is actually inside the Ask Nature Hive itself. So if you want to participate in that, here is your chance to get your 30% discount to join the Ask Nature Hive. This will be where we continue these conversations. John will be joining and continuing conversations within the Hive. You can ask questions of each other, embark upon other challenges that we're doing. We've got reading clubs coming up, lots of great events. Come on in here. This is your 30% off coupon to do it. We'll send this out in an email also, along with the YouTube archive of this whole conversation. And so if you're leaving now, thank you so much for joining us. It's really been wonderful to have you. If you're able to stay, stick around, send your questions, and we'll continue our conversation with John Murray. Right. John, I want to pry a little bit more into this Lord of the Rings because that's the second time that it came up. And, that's a big, rich tome, and there's a lot going on in that story. And I wonder if there's other, kind of green chemistry lessons that you draw from that, or that you see in other ways that kind of the lessons of chemistry work their way into our broader awareness. People tend to think of chemistry as a very difficult, walled off, field for the experts. But I think there's ways that its lessons and its relevance come up more than we maybe realize. And that seemed like one possible.
Well, again, it comes back to innovation and creativity in general. I feel, and again, this is just the way I look at things, innovation and creativity rarely, if ever, happens in the focal point. The harder you look at something, the less likely you are to come up with inspiration. But while you're staring at something, the peripheral has innovation and creativity coming because you're not forcing it. It's happening naturally. And so when we think about Lord of the Rings, and I turn my head 30 degrees here and I'm thinking about Frodo or Gandalf, the problem that I'm working on is now all of a sudden in my peripheral vision. And interestingly enough, that's in a way, that's kind of the beauty of biomimicry. Sometimes biomimicry, when you ask nature, if I'm saying I need to make a new product that does X, Y, and Z, and I look at nature, I am intentionally putting what I'm trying to do in my peripheral, and what a beautiful conduit to create that innovation and that creativity. But I do feel that invention never happens from stress, and so the peripheral is where that creativity actually happens. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay, we've got another one here. How about Nicholas? If you're ready, go ahead.
Hi, John.
Oh.
It was a really good talk, and I wanted to ask you, what is your position due to eutectic solvents, as in the solvents that are already being used in industry, and how do you see that coming in the future?
All right. So again, we need a diversity of solutions. Sorry for that play on the word of solutions and solvents, but had to go there. Sorry. But it's an interesting concept. Nature does very little chemistry in solution. It does some. But when you look at cellular processes and tissues and things like that, most control in nature happens actually from phase differentiation. You have a membrane, you've got one phase, you get another phase, you've got some transport mechanism that is allowing one reagent to go from one side to the other side. And I would actually argue that there's very little solution chemistry. It's surface bound and stuff like that. So we have artificially said, oh, we want to take chemistry, we want to put it into a solution to maximize diffusion. But here's the thing. When we dissolve reagents, why do we use solvents? We use solvents to increase the frequency of collision. We dissolve them so that they have free mobility. They bang around, and every once in a while they bang into each other. But here's the thing. 0.0000001% of the time do you actually have the reaction take place. The vast majority of time, what happens is they bang into each other and fall off, bang into each other and fall off. I would propose to you that there is never a reactive collision in biology. That in biology, everything is oriented first. They molecularly snuggle up and then they react. There's a surface, there's a membrane, there's an enzyme, there's a receptor, there's something coordinating that chemical reaction. So the very need to dissolve things, now what are we going to do? We're going to heat things up to high temperature, we're going to put things under high pressure to increase the frequency of collisions that are absolutely not even doing what we want them to do in the first place. So there's this new nascent field coming out, and it's actually been around for a while, but it's really gotten up in the last couple of years called mechanochemistry. And mechanochemistry, if you go back to indigenous times, think of what did humans do 1,000 years ago? Everything was mortar and pestle. Everything was grinding something against the stone, mixing things together. That humans invented chemistry with no solvent. Solvent is a 20, maybe 19th century invention. It's not something that's natural. It's not something we do. So mechanochemistry is a revitalization of what happens in the solid state when things tumble and mix together. And let's maybe think that we don't need any solvent. We don't need better solvents. Maybe we need to come up with ways of doing things without the solvents. It's going to take decades. We're going to need solvents. So what I say is that we need to improve the solvents while we invent ways to not need them at all. And so it's a temporal thing.
That's really
Thank
interesting.
you so much.
Go ahead. Yeah. As you described that, it kind of went to that like fundamental bit of like order out of chaos, right? When you think of life at start, and it's like this is not just the random interactions. It somehow has started this process that is replicating in a very orderly manner. And
Yeah.
that's kind of the secret of bio, or the key to bio in the first place.
Yeah. And again, it's because when people learn chemistry, the first thing they do, one of the things the first they do is they learn about atomic orbitals and molecular orbitals. An s orbital is a sphere, a p orbital is a dumbbell, a d orbital looks weird. And then after that chapter is done in the book, we go on, we never talk about it ever again. Okay. The reason biology creates the structures that it creates is because atomic orbitals are just as natural, and nature has evolved over 3.8 billion years to orient structures to take advantage of the optimized geometry of those atomic orbitals in the regions of electron density so that it happens. Nature doesn't have a chemistry book and a biology book. Nature has the nature book.
So here, I'm going to read this one on behalf of Franz, who was asking, nature does chemistry using so many steps versus in chemical processing, we have just a few steps. How do we evolve to that level of complexity?
So again, very, very important question is to again go back to this analogy of doing many things at the same time. All right. That we learn chemistry as if some actor comes on stage and does a soliloquy. Here I am. And then they go off stage and something else comes on. But that's not how nature does chemistry. If we're going to use this as an analogy, imagine that we're sitting in an auditorium and we're watching Richard III, a Shakespeare play. Okay, that's cool. Then someone decides to put Hamlet on the stage at the same time. Well, that's weird. So Richard III and Hamlet, they're not interacting with each other. The play's going on. It's kind of confusing. Okay, now let's put on Macbeth. Now let's put on Taming of the Shrew. Now let's put on Romeo and Juliet. There are 5 plays happening, and our heads are exploding. There's a cacophony. How am I going to take? I can't pay attention. There's 5 plays. Think of the chemical reactions that happen in with a cell. Not 5, not 50, not 500. Thousands of chemical reactions are being performed on the same stage. That biology has created this molecular choreography that all these things happen at the same time in the same place and they're reinforcing each other. One process is sticking phosphate groups on ATP to store energy. Another process is popping those phosphate groups off to take that energy away. Nature has evolved so that it isn't one flask, one reaction, another flask, another reaction. We need to do all these steps and we consolidate it. But we miss the elegance of it because all of that output, when we do it ourselves, waste is waste. In nature, because they're all proximate, they're all on the same stage, there is no waste. It's been consolidated, not only the molecularity, but also the energetics. Oh, you're on mute again. Sorry,
Yep,
Andrew.
thanks. We've got a practical application question now for from Rashida. Rashida, if you're ready.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. Thank you. So I wanted to know, sir, about the hairprint. I've been very curious to know about how would you compare that with a very popular tree, a plant, that is called the mehendi, that is enormous botanical name, Lawsonia enormous. How would you compare that with something like hairprint?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that because I don't know that answer. What yours is. I'll explain to you how hairprint works. What I realized with hairprint is that when we get older, some of us get an enzyme in our hair process that stops working. It gets oxidized through age and stops working. What that enzyme does when we're younger is it makes a first molecule that then goes to make a second molecule, then it goes to make a third molecule. And what I realized is that all of us make the same molecules. And that if you have black hair, if you have brown hair, if you have light brown hair, if you have dark brown hair, it's all the same. But what happens is our hair, the protein in our hair template, the three-dimensional oligomerization of these materials, and what actually causes the color of the hair is the protein in your hair itself. And so what I did is I said, okay, if I can just take that first step, this tyrosinase oxidative cascade, have that first reaction happen, but have it happen so gentle that I'm not hitting it with high concentrations of peroxides or any high temperature nasty, but do it gentle so I don't obliterate that templating. Then what happens is it goes into the hair and it finds its little spots and orients to make that color. Every ingredient in it is FDA approved edible stuff. I've been on stage when CEO has reached in and demonstrated and ate the stuff in front of people. And so I don't know how good of a day they had the next day, but yeah, it's really non-toxic and benign, but the way it works. But I can't compare it to that because I don't understand. If you want to send me an email and explain, I'll be happy to take a look at it. Yeah.
Yes, I will. So, because that's just a plant-based thing, and perhaps there may be some chemical mixing in it, because there are people trying to make it into a black mehendi. It's basically a brown texture.
Interesting.
So, but it's very widely used here. So, thank you so much, sir.
You're welcome.
So John, the way that you described it, how much of that was like new research that as you did that research, was that pioneering? Did anyone realize that before, that we all have the same chemicals in our hair and that's what creates color variation
Don't know. So couple, I'll share with you some more weird things. I realized early on that I had to make ignorance an asset in my life, because what do I know? And so I boldly go into hair and I start working on hair. And what I really believe the magic is that if I worked in hair for 10 years, if I worked for companies spending billions of dollars to invent these things, our education system doesn't teach us to imagine what could happen. It teaches us what won't happen. And so most people say, oh, that won't work, that won't work. And they won't go in and try it because they're very well educated and they know it won't work. Because I don't know, I just go get some hair, I put the stuff in and I see what happens. It's interesting. I ask my scientist working for me not to do a literature search. I asked them to go in the lab, trust their instinct, find out their own hypotheses, develop their own thing. Then after a few weeks, then do the literature search and superimpose the literature search on what you have come up with your own instinct, with your own self-confidence. What'll happen is one thing, no, people already knew that. Oh, people already knew that. Oh, I can't find anyone who's thought about this. And that's how innovation happens. But if I read all the journals and stuff, yes, it'll teach me all this precedence, but it'll probably fill me with so much bias that I'll no longer see those open holes. And so don't do it. You know, there's no literature searches in nature. It's not that you don't do it eventually. You just don't do it first.
Yeah, it's the layering up, but it's giving
Yeah.
yourself, that opportunity to be explorative.
Yeah.
Explorative.
And
Yeah.
being vulnerable. Being vulnerable. I'm going to make an idiot out of myself most of the time, but I don't care. Yeah.
Yeah.